You feel queasy because the spider put you in a web and injected you with venom? Well, while you're in your death throes because you're wrapped up in a spider cocoon, do you want me to read you a story? I guess I'll take that as a yes, because you're paralyzed and can't say no. Today we're going to read Habetrot the Spinstress. This is a story with a nice fair folk, one of the gentry. Are you ready? Are you just going to lay on me the whole time? While your brother sings the song of his people in the background. Well, you seem fine.
My butt crack.
All right. In bygone days, in an old farmhouse, which stood by a river, there lived a beautiful girl called Maisie. She was tall and straight, with auburn hair and blue eyes.
And she was dying of slavery.
Kind of. And she was the prettiest girl in all the valley.
She never got a job.
Kind of. Wow. Did you read ahead? All right, let me read a little bit. And one would have thought that she would have been
Died.
And one would have thought that she would have been the pride of her mother's heart. But instead of this, her mother used to sigh and shake her head whenever she looked at her. And why? Because in those days, all men were sensible. And instead of looking out for pretty girls to be their wives, they looked out for girls who could cook and spin, and who gave promise of becoming notable housewives. Maisie's mother had been an industrious spinster. Not like never got married, but she would spin at the wheel. She could spin thread. So back then, they didn't have you couldn't go to Walmart or whatever. You couldn't go to a store and buy clothes. You had to make your own clothes from scratch. So they had to get wool from sheep, and then they had to spin it to turn it into thread. Then they had to make their own fabric, and then they had to make their own thread to sew the fabric. It was a big thing that everybody had to know how to do back then.
So what I'm getting is that the 1980s.
This was not the 1980s.
This was before?
This is probably 16th, 17th century. This is...
So what I'm getting here is in the 16th or 17th century, what happened was that you had to make your own set of clothes, and people sometimes weren't as good as others were.
At making clothes?
Yes.
That's correct. But this all fell on women. Women had to do this. This was considered women's work.
Why?
Because...
This is called slavery.
Kind of. Anyway, Maisie's mother had been an industrious spinster, but alas, to her sore grief and disappointment, her daughter did not take after her.
I'm trying to balance right now. I'm trying not to fall and hit my head.
The girl loved to be out of doors, chasing butterflies and plucking wild flowers, far better than sitting at her spinning wheel. So when her mother saw one after another of Maisie's companions, who were not nearly so pretty as she was, getting rich husbands, she sighed and said, "Woe's me, child, for methinks no brave wooer will ever pause at our door while they see thee so idle and thoughtless." But Maisie only laughed. At last her mother grew really angry, and one bright spring morning she laid down 3 heads of flax on the table, saying sharply, "I will have no more of this dallying. People will say that it is my blame that no wooer comes to seek thee. I cannot have thee left on my hands to be laughed at, as the idle maid who would not marry. So now thou must work, and if thou hast not these heads of flax spun into 7 hanks of thread in 3 days, I will then speak to the mother at St. Mary's Convent, and thou wilt go there and learn to be a nun."
Holy.
Yeah, the only options for women back then were to be married off, and if you couldn't be married off, you had to go work at a convent. They couldn't get jobs or do anything.
Now
like that.
that's just messed up.
It's pretty messed up, but it was normalized back then, so they didn't really think about it.
I'm gonna go get a snack because I'm hungry.
Okay, I'm going to record without being interrupted for a
Okay.
change, so go do that. Now, though Maisie was an idle girl, she had no wish to be shut up in a nunnery, so she tried not to think of the sunshine outside, but sat down soberly with her distaff. But alas, she was so little accustomed to work that she made but slow progress, and although she sat at the spinning wheel all day and never once went out of doors, yeah, she found at night that she had only spun half a hank of yarn. You want a gonzito? Okay, go get one. I thought I wouldn't be interrupted. The next day it was even worse, for her arms ached so much she could only work very slowly. That night she cried herself to sleep, and next morning, seeing that it was quite hopeless to expect to get her task finished, she threw down her distaff in despair and ran out of doors. Near the house was a deep dell, through which ran a tiny stream. Maisie loved this dell. The flowers grew so abundantly there. This morning she ran down to the edge of the stream and seated herself on a large stone. It was a glorious morning. The hazel trees were newly covered with leaves, and the branches nodded over her head and showed like delicate tracery against the blue sky. The primroses and sweet-scented violets peeped out from among the grass, and a little water wagtail came and perched on a stone in the middle of the stream, and bobbed up and down till it seemed as if he were nodding to Maisie, and as if he were trying to say to her, "Never mind, cheer up." But the poor girl was in no mood that morning to enjoy the flowers and the birds. Instead of watching them, as she generally did, she hid her face in her hands and wondered what would become of her. She rocked herself to and fro as she thought how terrible it would be if her mother fulfilled her threat and shut her up in the convent of St. Mary with the grave, solemn-faced sisters, who seemed as if they had completely forgotten what it was like to be young and run about in the sunshine and laugh and pick the fresh spring flowers.
"Oh, I cannot do it! I cannot do it!" she cried at last. "It would kill me to be a nun."
"And who wants to make a pretty wench like thee into a nun?" asked a queer, cracked voice quite close to her. Maisie jumped up and stood staring in front of her as if she had been moonstruck. For just across the stream from where she had been sitting, there was a curious boulder with a round hole in the middle of it, for all the world like a big apple with the core taken out. Maisie knew it well. She had often sat upon it and wondered how the funny hole came to be there. It was no wonder that she stared, for, seated on this stone, was the queerest little old woman that she had ever seen in her life. Indeed, had it not been for her silver hair and the white mutch with the big frill that she wore on her head, Maisie would have taken her for a little girl. She wore such a very short skirt, only reaching down to her knees. Her face, inside the frill of her cap, was round, and her cheeks were rosy, and she had little black eyes, which twinkled merrily as she looked at the startled maiden. On her shoulders was a black and white checked shawl, and on her legs, which she dangled over the edge of the boulder, she wore black silk stockings and the neatest little shoes, with great silver buckles. In fact, she would have been quite a pretty old lady had it not been for her lips, which were very long and very thick, and made her look quite ugly in spite of her rosy cheeks and black eyes. Maisie stood and looked at her for such a long time in silence that she repeated her question. "And who wants to make a pretty wench like thee into a nun? More likely that some gallant gentleman should want to make a bride of thee."
"Oh no," answered Maisie. "My mother says no gentleman would look at me because I cannot spin."
"Nonsense," said the tiny old woman. "Spinning is all very well for old folks like me. My lips, as thou seest, are long and ugly because I have spun so much, for I always wet my fingers with them, the easier to draw the thread from the distaff. No, no, take care of thy beauty, child. Do not waste it over the spinning wheel, nor yet in a nunnery."
"If my mother only thought as thou thoughtst,"
replied the girl sadly, and, encouraged by the old woman's kindly face, she told her the whole story. "Well," said the old woman, "I do not like to see pretty girls weep. What if I were able to help thee and spin the flax for thee?" Maisie thought that this offer was too good to be true, but her new friend bade her run home and fetch the flax. And I need not tell you that she required no second bidding. When she returned, she handed the bundle to the little old lady, and was about to ask her where she should meet her in order to get the thread from her when it was spun, when a sudden noise behind her made her look round. She saw nothing, but what was her horror and surprise when she turned back again to find that the old woman had vanished entirely, flax and all. What do you think happened?
"She's a fairy. She was a fairy."
Yeah. But is she going to help her, or did she just want some flax and just run off? Is she going to help? You don't think she's going to help? Okay, so your vote is no. She rubbed her eyes and looked all around, but she was nowhere to be seen. The girl was utterly bewildered. She wondered if she could have been dreaming. But no, that could not be. There were her footprints leading up the bank and down again, where she had gone for the flax and brought it back. And there was the mark of her foot, wet with dew, on a stone in the middle of the stream, where she had stood when she had handed the flax up to the mysterious little stranger. What was she to do now? What would her mother say when, in addition to not having finished the task that had been given her, she had to confess to having lost the greater part of the flax also? She ran up and down the little dell, hunting amongst the bushes and peeping into every nook and cranny of the bank where the little old woman might have hidden herself. It was all in vain, and at last, tired out with the search, she sat down on the stone once more and presently fell fast asleep. When she awoke, it was evening. The sun had set, and the yellow glow on the western horizon was fast giving place to the silvery light of the moon. She was sitting thinking of the curious events of the day, and gazing at the great boulder opposite, when it seemed to her as if a distant murmur of voices came from it. With one bound, she crossed the stream and clambered onto the stone. She was right. Someone was talking underneath it, far down in the ground. She put her ear close to the stone and listened. The voice of the queer little old woman came up through the hole. "Ho, ho, my pretty little wench, little knows that my name is Habetrot." Full of curiosity, Maisie put her eye to the opening, and the strangest sight that she had ever seen met her gaze. She seemed to be looking through a telescope into a wonderful little valley. The trees there were brighter and greener than any that she had ever seen before, and there were beautiful flowers, quite different from the flowers that grew in her country. The little valley was carpeted with the most exquisite moss, and up and down it walked her tiny friend, busily engaged in spinning. She was not alone, for round her were a circle of other little old women, who were seated on large white stones, and they were all spinning away as fast as they could. Occasionally one would look up, and then Maisie saw that they all seemed to have the same long, thick lips that her friend had. She really felt very sorry, as they all looked exceedingly kind, and might have been pretty had it not been for this defect. One of the spinstresses sat by herself, and was engaged in winding the thread, which the others had spun into hanks. Maisie did not think that this little lady looked so nice as the others. She was dressed entirely in gray, and had a big hooked nose and great horn spectacles. She seemed to be called Slantily Mab, for Maisie heard Habetrot address her by that name, telling her to make haste and tie up all the thread, for it was getting late, and it was time that the young girl had it to carry home to her mother. Maisie did not quite know what to do, or how she was to get the thread, for she did not like to shout down the hole in case the queer little old woman should be angry at being watched. However, Habetrot, as she had called herself, suddenly appeared on the path beside her, with the hanks of thread in her hand.
"Oh, thank you," cried Maisie. "What can I do to show how thankful I am?"
"Nothing," answered the fairy, "for I do not work for reward. Only do not tell your mother who span the thread for thee." It was now late, and Maisie lost no time in running home with the precious thread upon her shoulder. When she walked into the kitchen, she found that her mother had gone to bed. She seemed to have had a busy day, for there, hanging up in the wide chimney, in order to dry, were 7 large black puddings. The fire was low but bright and clear, and the sight of it and the sight of the puddings suggested to Maisie that she was very hungry, and that fried black puddings were very good. Flinging the thread down on the table, she hastily pulled off her shoes, so as not to make a noise and awake her mother, and, getting down the frying pan from the wall, she took one of the black puddings from the chimney and fried it and ate it. Still she felt hungry, so she took another, and then another, till they were all gone. Then she crept upstairs to her little bed and fell fast asleep. Next morning her mother came downstairs before Maisie was awake. In fact, she had not been able to sleep much for thinking of her daughter's careless ways, and had been sorrowfully making up her mind that she must lose no time in speaking to the abbess of St. Mary's about this idle girl of hers. What was her surprise to see on the table the 7 beautiful hanks of thread, while, on going to the chimney to take down a black pudding to fry for breakfast, she found that every one of them had been eaten. She did not know whether to laugh for joy that her daughter had been so industrious, or to cry for vexation because all her lovely black puddings, which she had expected would last for a week at least, were gone. In her bewilderment, she sang out, oh gosh, now I have to sing. I don't even know what these words are. Sayin'?
Scene.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know. My daughter's spun sin, sin, sin. My daughter's eaten sin, sin, sin. And all before daylight. I don't know how to sing that. Now, I forgot to tell you that, about half a mile from where the old farmhouse stood, there was a beautiful castle where a very rich young nobleman lived. He was both good and brave, as well as rich, and all the mothers who had pretty daughters used to wish that he would come their way, some day, and fall in love with one of them. But he had never done so, and everyone said, "He is too grand to marry any country girl. One day he will go away to London town and marry a duke's daughter." Well, this fine spring morning it chanced that this young nobleman's favorite horse had lost a shoe, and he was so afraid that any of the grooms might ride it along the hard road, and not on the soft grass at the side, that he said that he would take it to the smithy himself. So it happened that he was riding along by Maisie's garden gate as her mother came into the garden singing these strange lines. He stopped his horse and said good-naturedly, "Good day, madam. May I ask why you sing such a strange song?" Maisie's mother made no answer, but turned and walked into the house, and the young nobleman, being very anxious to know what it all meant, hung his bridle over the garden gate and followed her. She pointed to the 7 hanks of thread lying on the table and said, "This hath my daughter done before breakfast." Then the young man asked to see the maiden who was so industrious, and her mother went and pulled Maisie from behind the door, where she had hidden herself when the stranger came in, for she had come downstairs while her mother was in the garden. She looked so lovely in her fresh morning gown of blue gingham, with her auburn hair curling softly round her brow, and her face all over blushes at the sight of such a gallant young man, that he quite lost his heart and fell in love with her on the spot. "Ah," said he, "my dear mother always told me to try and find a wife who was both pretty and useful, and I have succeeded beyond my expectations. Do not let our marriage, I pray thee, good dame, be too long deferred." Maisie's mother was overjoyed, as you may imagine, at this piece of unexpected good fortune, and busied herself in getting everything ready for the wedding. But Maisie herself was a little perplexed. She was afraid that she would be expected to spin a great deal when she was married and lived at the castle, and if that were so, her husband was sure to find out that she was not really such a good spinstress as he thought she was. In her trouble she went down, the night before her wedding, to the great boulder by the stream in the glen, and climbing up on it, she laid her head against the stone and called softly down the hole,
"Habetrot, dear Habetrot."
The little old woman soon appeared, and, with twinkling eyes, asked her what was troubling her so much just when she should have been happy, and Maisie told her. "Trouble not thy pretty head about that," answered the fairy, "but come here with thy bridegroom next week, when the moon is full, and I warrant that he will never ask thee to sit at a spinning wheel again." Accordingly, after all the wedding festivities were over and the couple had settled down at the castle, on the appointed evening, Maisie suggested to her husband that they should take a walk together in the moonlight. She was very anxious to see what the little fairy would do to help her, for that very day he had been showing her all over her new home, and he had pointed out to her the beautiful new spinning wheel made of ebony, which had belonged to his mother, saying proudly, "Tomorrow, little one, I shall bring some flax from the town, and then the maids will see what clever little fingers my wife has." Maisie had blushed as red as a rose as she bent over the lovely wheel, and then felt quite sick, as she wondered whatever she would do if Habetrot did not help her. So on this particular evening, after they had walked in the garden, she said that she should like to go down to the little dell and see how the stream looked by the moonlight. So to the dell they went. As soon as they came to the boulder, Maisie put her head against it and whispered, "Habetrot, dear Habetrot!" And in an instant the little old woman appeared. She bowed in a stately way as if they were both strangers to her and said, "Welcome, sir and madam, to the spinster's dell." And then she tapped on the root of a great oak tree with a tiny wand which she held in her hand, and a green door, which Maisie never remembered having noticed before, flew open, and they followed the fairy through it into the other valley which Maisie had seen through the hole in the great stone. All the little old women were sitting on their white chucky stones, busy at work, only they seemed far uglier than they had seemed at first, and Maisie noticed that the reason for this was that, instead of wearing red skirts and white mutches as they had done before, they now wore caps and dresses of dull gray, and instead of looking happy, they all seemed to be trying who could look most, whatever, that's how it's written. They all seemed to be trying who could look most miserable, and who could push out their long lips furthest, as they wet their fingers to draw the thread from their distaffs. "Save us and help us! What a lot of hideous old witches!" exclaimed her husband. "Whatever could this funny old woman mean by bringing a pretty child like thee to look at them? Thou wilt dream of them for a week and a day. Just look at their lips." And, pushing Maisie behind him, he went up to one of them and asked her what had made her mouth grow so ugly. She tried to tell him, but all the sound that he could hear was something that sounded like spin. He asked another one, and her answer sounded like this, span. He tried a third, and hers sounded like spun. He seized Maisie by the hand and hurried her through the green door. "By my troth," he said, "my mother's spinning wheel may turn to gold ere I let thee touch it, if this is what spinning leads to. Rather than that thy pretty face should be spoilt, the linen chests at the castle may get empty and remain so forever." Priorities. So it came to pass that Maisie could be out of doors all day, wandering about with her husband, and laughing and singing to her heart's content. And whenever there was flax at the castle to be spun, it was carried down to the big boulder in the dell and left there, and Habetrot and her companions spun it, and there was no more trouble about the matter.
Wow, 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. You like that one, huh?
Wait, is it done?
Did you even hear the ending? You were daydreaming, weren't you?
Well, I did hear one thing is that her lips were busted and the man was like, "Oh, God, she's ugly."
Anyway, yeah, so men only wanted pretty and useful women. They didn't care if they got along with them or had anything in common.
Oh, what?
Well, back then people had to be very utilitarian in order to survive, so they didn't really think. It was very transactional. Nobody really got married for the sake of just loving the other person.
Oh.
So that's why she was so despairing, because she was like, either I have to spin well or I get basically sold off to the convent.
Anyways, guys, like and subscribe. And so check more description for more detailed information.
What? Check more description for more detail information. You heard it here. Is that it? We're not gonna break it down. You're done. So what did you think about Habetrot? I liked Habetrot. I thought she was a sweetheart. And I thought
it was a little weird with the physics.
The physics, because she could look through a stone and see another world.
Yes.
Well, yeah, because they're in an alternate reality. They're in the.
Ow!
She's in the other world.
No, she's in heaven.
She's in heaven? Is that where she is? Is she an angel?
She's in hell.
No, she's in hell? Well, hell seems nice. I wouldn't mind going. All right, I think that's about all I'm going to get out of him. Thanks for listening, y'all.
And also click the subscribe button and also like the video.
Yes, please click the subscribe bus. Later. Thanks be to mine patrons. Of the Palingenesis Pals, Moai Man. Of the legendary Lagomorphs, AJ Shin. Of the Regal Rabbits, I Have a Name and Asterisk. And last but not least, the Bunbies. Thank you for your continued support, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye!